What's up, everybody? And welcome to the Atheist Roundtable. And I have a special guest with me here tonight, and we're going to be reviewing a video. And I'm anxious to get into it. It's a topic that I love to talk about. It's near and dear to me. I'm passionate about it, and we're going to dig into it. So without further ado, I do have my good friend Bryce Roney joining me tonight. Let's bring him onto the screen. What's going on, Bryce? How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm chilling, man. I'm chilling. I'm excited to talk about this video. I know before we jump into it, you and I share a similar background as far as coming out of religion. It was like, I term it now, escaping faith or escaping religion. Before we do get into it, do you mind sharing a little bit of your background for those that are watching and listening? That way they understand we're coming from a perspective of having experienced that and having to find our way out of this.
Yeah. I've told the story a couple times, and I feel like hopefully I don't change aspects of it every time I tell it. But as far as my recollection goes, raised in a Christian, the majority, just like the majority of people in the United States, liberal Christians, grew up on the East Coast. I'm from New York. And so it wasn't really like a hardcore situation when I was a kid. It was just, yeah, we're Christians. We believe in Jesus. We celebrate, Easter and Christmas and all that. And get to church every once in a while with the grandparents, and, it wasn't really that big of a deal. I didn't start getting more into it until after I joined the military when I was 19. And realized that this was something that a lot of people believed in, and much more strongly than I did. And so I started reading the Bible, or at least parts of it, the New Testament, and the parts that I understood and the parts that I was able to connect to my life at that time from listening to the preachers, because I was attending church semi-regularly at this point. I started seeing it as something that kind of made sense. And then I got a little bit older and became sort of an internet apologist, and I was joining, debate groups and Christian apologist websites, trying to talk to atheists and people of other religions, and explain to them why I think the Bible makes sense, and why I thought it was consistent with science. And I was doing it from a liberal perspective, and so I accepted evolution as guided through by God. I accepted the age of the earth, but God still created everything in 6 days. So but they weren't 6 literal days. They were long periods of time. So I had all of these different kinds of excuses and different modern apologetics that seemed to be consistent with science as I understood it, and that's how I was able to make sense of it, and that's how I tried to explain it to other people. And then I started reading more of the Bible, and I realized that the answers, or the challenges I was getting from a lot of the atheists, I didn't really have answers to, and it required me doing more and more research, and it became more and more difficult to try to produce reasonable answers for them. And that's when I realized I need to study this a little bit more, and that's when my faith started going down, because I started to see that I didn't really have good explanations for why there was slavery in the Bible, or genocides, or why homosexuality was bad for no apparent reason, just God doesn't like it, or why he made hell, or all of these things that I was confused about. And so I had a little bit of a crisis of faith, but I didn't give up. I just prayed and prayed for the answer. But my prayer was never really answered, and that made me even more confused. That why would God not be answering my prayers? And so right around this time, I started learning a little bit more about critical thinking and argumentation and skepticism. And then I realized all of the mistakes I was making and all of the logical fallacies that I had fallen into when I was coming to the conclusion that there was a God, or that prayer made sense, or that faith was a reasonable path to truth. And then I started seeing, I started looking up atheism on the internet, figuring out, well, what do I really believe? Maybe because I don't want to just be an atheist because atheism is bad. And then I started watching videos by atheists. I fell into the atheist experience and started listening to a lot of Matt Dillahunty's arguments and Tracy's arguments, and realized that everything they're saying seems to make a lot of sense, seems to be consistent with what I'm learning about critical thinking. I have no good answers or good challenges or counter arguments to what they're saying. And apparently neither does anyone else when they call it. Like, I kept waiting for some Christian to come up with good arguments for me to believe. And then I realized what I was doing. I realized that I was trying to find good reasons to believe, which meant that I didn't actually believe. And instead of questioning, instead of trying to find ways for, why, God didn't make sense, I was focused on only why it could make sense. So I was approaching it from a completely biased point of view. I was trying to interpret evidence through the God lens. And then I realized I was doing that, and that was not objective, that was not skepticism. And as soon as I realized that, it was like a light switch. I could no longer believe. So it was pretty hard at first because it was something that I felt like I was dependent on for a lot of my life. I had a lot of fears. I think for me, for a lot of people, religion comes down to fear of the unknown, fear of death, fear of, not having somebody there, looking in and making sure everything is okay. And just a lot of the unknown. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Where did everything come from? I had all these questions that I thought I had answers to, but I realized they weren't really answers. They were because they themselves had no explanation. They were just things that I had heard or convinced myself that didn't really make any sense once you started peeling back the onion and digging a little bit deeper. And so I had no answers. And so losing faith and deconverting was difficult for me at first. But then I started seeing the positives of it, and the fact that I had this religious baggage, the insidious baggage of religion, I call it, off my shoulders anymore. And I didn't have to worry about trying to get to the good next life, and I could focus on what was important here. And that's when I became a humanist. And and so I think I spoke out a couple times on my Facebook page. I started making posts about this, and then a couple people noticed me, including you guys, and here I am.
No, that's awesome. I remember the first couple times that I heard you engaging on the Empathetic Atheist show, as well as Apostle Mike, and both he and I talked, and we agreed it was like, that is gonna be great voice for it, great argumentation. Why is this guy not out in the forefront more? Yeah.
I have to say, I'd never really considered doing this. I am on the EA show now, the Empathetic Atheist, and it is largely thanks to you guys. I think I had been a guest on there a couple times, but it wasn't like a full-time serious thing. It was just something I was just doing for fun. I had somewhat of an interest in it. I was watching some of the guests that were on before that, and I was like, wow, this guy's argument makes no sense. Maybe someone should ask him this question. And then I just kind of fell into it,
You do a great job, as our friends at the EA show in general do. And again, another shout out to them. They just hit their 1K mark.
Monetized.
Yeah. So that's fantastic, and they keep getting better and better, and it's been awesome to watch them grow, or you guys grow as well. So shout out to the EA show. But yeah, before we dig in, most of the people here are tired of hearing my story, but just for the recap, I was a Christian for 30-something years. I was in the extreme evangelical charismatic movement, so talking in tongues, shigabahai, passing the devil by, throwing oil everywhere. And if you didn't have God in your heart, you were shit, you were a filthy rag, you were anything but worthy of being happy or complete or anything like that. So that will lead us right into the video. And this video, this gentleman claims to have seen Jesus. And I won't give it away.
Okay.
The only thing I'll say is the intro kind of gave you a little, teaser into it. Is my question going into this, and even probably at the end that we can discuss a little further, is if I were a Christian, I would assume that if I got to see Jesus, and I guess Jesus sees me all the time, but if we got to see each other, like I get to experience that, I would hope that both of us would be happy to see each other. That would be my hope. So that's all I'm going to say. We'll dig into this video. And I don't think that that's what happened to this gentleman. So let's get to it. Let's get to it. And here we go.
Before I share this testimony, I want to preface it by saying that God is so patient and so merciful, and he's so long-suffering. Isaiah talks about the nature of God and the nature of the Messiah that was prophesied. And he says, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, until justice goes forth in fullness. Anyone who knows my testimony knows that I've experienced firsthand how gracious and patient God can be and is with our process and with our being human. When God comes to anybody in judgment, it's only after he's already come to them with patience and grace and mercy about a thing multiple times. It's only after he's extended the invitation to repent. He even says in the Bible, today, I place before you life and death, choose life. So it's so important to understand, anytime a message is coming from God about judgment, or that some kind of verdict has been made, the only way to contextualize that rightly is to understand that by the time we've gotten there, God has already offered mercy time and time again. So when I had this terrifying vision of Jesus, it's literally one of two times that I've ever experienced.
I can't hear you. Your audio's low.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Two things already right there that I hear is one, and I always go back to this, but it's the only clear definition of love that we have according to the Bible, and that's in Corinthians where it says, love is patient, love is kind. And what I think about here is that should be applied here, but also love does not keep an account of wrongs. So what are we talking about? That we have all of these things that are leading up to God showing us mercy time and time and time again, if he's not keeping wrongs. Like why is that there unless we're keeping tally marks, right? So
yeah, it's sort of a contradiction. If God is a God of justice, but he's not keeping wrongs, there can be no justice.
Yeah.
He's either a God of justice or he's not.
Yeah, and that's where I think one of the greatest contradictions that Christians have to deal with within a text when it comes to the character of God is he has to relinquish mercy to extend grace, and he has to relinquish mercy to then extend. Extend justice. So that in and of itself is the greatest contradiction that Christians have to deal with within the text. And then the last thing there before I paused it was I think it was the word. I think the word he used was terrified.
Terrifying, yeah, a terrifying experience of Jesus.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm looking for this God that is love and is the savior of humanity. The last thing I want to do is be terrified when I experience this thing that's supposed to love me unconditionally. Period.
Yeah, generally, I would agree with you, and I think that seems intuitive to anyone who has a God concept, particularly in Christianity. But then there's the other argument. Some Christians approach it from the standpoint of fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, which that's Old Testament. But if Jesus is Lord, should you fear him? I don't know. I would say that was not my experience, or that would not be my position back when I was a Christian. If I had a vision of something that I felt was terrifying, I would not have considered it Jesus. I would have immediately questioned, even if it was asserting itself to be Jesus. I think I would have been skeptical of that. I didn't know much about skepticism as a Christian. I know much more about it now. But as a Christian believer, I probably would have been skeptical if Jesus appeared to me and appeared to be terrifying. But I don't know how he's going to describe his terrifying experience, but it would be interesting.
It gets better. And for those in the chat, I apologize. I just upgraded a piece of sound gear, and we should be good. You shouldn't be getting any more reverb or anything. Just let me know in the chat if you are. What's up, Captain Dad? What's up, everybody in the chat? Sorry about that. I didn't shout you out at the beginning. We will at the end, though. Don't you worry.
Experienced God in a way that's utterly terrifying, and rightfully so, because it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. People try to make God out to be
Still a little bit echoey, but I don't think it's too bad.
Okay. Yeah, chat room. Let me know. But just those things. Let me. I might know one more. Check one more thing here. Thanks for letting me learn this on the fly, guys. I apologize. All right, should be better now. Should be much better now. But we keep hearing the words terrified and terrified. And the reason I want to pause it there and address that is this is how we get to religious trauma. This is how we get to emotional and psychological abuse, and then hide it behind religion. And we use religion as the scapegoat, for that. So I would tell anybody, if you just got quote unquote saved and you're hearing your leaders, your pastors talking about being terrified or trembling or anything like that, just run, just go. Don't spend another minute. Just run.
You might be in the wrong religion. Find the religion to where it's, well, no, I don't want to do that either. But I was about to say something equally unreasonable, but no, yeah, you're right.
human. And although he became human in the person of Jesus Christ, to try to fully understand him in our limited human perspective is foolishness. We give authority to a natural judge in the earth, and that judge has the authority to end a person's life. How much more does God reserve the right to execute judgment with his absolutely perfect perspective, with an absolutely perfect nature? There's literally no shadow of turning in God. He is light. And the Bible says that he is love. So when God goes to judge, there's no room for fault in God in his judgment.
Pause it right there for a second. So there's so many things said there that I could just go into. This idea that he's the perfect judge. First of all, if we can't fully understand, if no human can understand God, how could we assess that he's a perfect judge? How did you reach that conclusion? You don't even you've admitted that you don't even have the ability to assess that because no human can. And yet you've concluded that, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how you feel about that. I think that this idea that God is love, you talked about the greatest contradiction, the contrast between judgment and mercy. There's another great contradiction that I've always found, not always, but recently, this idea that God is love, but he also hates at the same time. Well, hate is the opposite of love. And so if you are love, you shouldn't be capable of hate. If you are hating at any moment of any time, anything, then you're not love. By definition, you may be partially love. You may be 93.4% love, but you're also hate. You're at least 6 things hate, according to Proverbs. So how do you square that?
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And not to go down a path into argumentations and arguments for or against the existence of God or anything, but to go along the lines of what you're saying and not dive into the philosophical part of this. Even with evil and sin and hate and all those things there, if you are perfection and you create everything and it is your creation, right? You are there. There were no other. There's nothing else involved in the creation. It's just you, this perfect being. All you should be able to reproduce is
perfection.
So unless you intentionally fucked it up, all you should reproduce is perfection. And that's one of my hangups. And again, that's a tough argument. And I don't want to go into philosophy right now and all that. But to me, if you really loved, you are love, you are perfection, you're the alpha and omega, the beginning and the end. How did sin, hate, evil, how did any of that ever become your offspring?
I, the Lord, create evil, according to Isaiah.
But then that shows that everything else is bullshit.
I mean, it's either true or it's not, you know. If that's true, then the rest is not. If the other parts are true, then that's not, and their Bible is false either way. But some parts of it are wrong. Both things can't be true at the same time.
Correct. Yeah, there's you either you are all love, so it's your DNA, or it's not. You still have parts of hate in you. There has to be, like you said, there has to be a little bit for that.
Yeah. Yeah, there are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that he detests, and some of them include people. So it's not this idea of love the sinner, hate the sin. No, he hates the sinner too. There are specific sinners that the Bible says he hates. So that's obviously not love. So I don't know how you can reconcile that, but
yeah, and there's several times in the Old Testament where he sent armies to go and execute these people,
which is funny. You'd think an all-powerful God who killed the whole world in a flood would have the power to execute these people himself. The fact that he's sending other people to execute other people, that doesn't seem like a story that was written by God. That seems like something men wrote to cover the fact that they wanted to kill these other people. That's the way that I would do it. That's what I would say if I wanted to kill a bunch of people. I would say that, well, God told me to.
And that's where, because obviously we don't believe that this God exists. We don't have good reason to believe this God exists. But let's say for 1 second that he did.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that God actually pulled the Charles Manson effect, where he didn't actually go and kill them. He ordered other people to go do his dirty work for him. That way he could appear and seem to like, oh, no, I had nothing to do with that.
Right. And how did that work out for Charles Manson?
Exactly.
Nobody remembers the names of any of the killers, but we do remember Charles Manson's name, the mastermind behind all of the killings.
Yep, absolutely. So, all right, let's listen to the rest of this fun stuff.
Clear time and time again that he delights in showing mercy. It says he's slow to wrath. So when I had this visitation from God and I saw just a hair of what it is like to test God's patience, it was one of the most, if not the absolute most terrifying experience I have ever had. And if as an individual or as a society, as the Bible has already made it plain at the end of the age, when God says he's done, that he's tried, and now there's nothing left to do but execute judgment, not only is he perfect.
Your voice went quiet again.
Can you hear me now? Check 1, 2.
Yeah. Yep.
I'd also like to point out in Corinthians, it also says that love never gives up. But proceed, brother.
And right to do so, but it is the most horrible thing that could ever possibly happen. And I would say mostly because it shouldn't have happened. Because I guarantee there were lots of opportunities for people to make the right choice. So this is what I experienced. Years and years back, I had begun my walk with God. I had already learned how real he was. I learned to go to the Bible, to feed on the Word of God, and I learned to connect with God through the Holy Spirit. He had given me a new identity. I was already born again. I was already walking as a son of God. But I spent a lot of time vacillating in my lifestyle because of deep-rooted issues like insecurity and this tenacious hunger for affirmation, mostly desiring that from a romantic relationship, but really any way that I could get affirmation. And there were just areas of my mind that still needed to be renewed, that even though God had had his hand on it, I really fought with God about letting him be the all in all for that need.
So what I would like to point out there is what he's sharing with us right now is he has some very natural desires or cravings or whatever, and he wants to test those things. He wants to feel, smell, see, absorb, enjoy life and the experiences that life has to offer. But then there's this thing called religion that to handicap and minimize his ability to enjoy this one life as far as we know, this one life that we get to live. And this is where the old Christian part of me that maybe there is still a little bit of regret there, that my heart does ache or break for folks that are still in this spot right here, what he's getting ready to talk about. And this is the part that still, if I can be really honest with you, Bryce, and everybody listen, this is the part where it gets tough for me, because my heart does break, because I was that guy. I was this guy where it was like, no, I have to, like Paul said, I crucify myself daily, and I sacrifice myself daily to be more like Christ. And I missed out on so many different things in a certain stretch of my life because of this very mindset and this kind of blind faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, according to him, it's not blind. It is blind faith, but presumably he's going to talk about. I think he's probably going to go into more detail about this vision that he had. But one of the problems I see here right off the bat is that he found religion before he figured out how to reason. And if he had this vision before he figured out how to interpret a religion, if he's interpreting the vision through the lens of his religion, he's screwed, because he's not using any critical thinking, and the religion provides a solution for what the vision means, in his mind it does anyway. But he hasn't asked any of the questions that you should ask when you have a vision like this. What did I really see? Was this real? Did anyone else see it? Was I dreaming? Was this a delusion? How do I know? How do I tell? He asked none of those questions. He was looking for Christianity, fell into Christianity, and then had a vision where Christianity supposedly tells him what the vision is. You've kind of screwed yourself if that's the order in which that happens.
Yeah, and I'll hit the play button here again so we can get into the meat of his story. But that's the and Bryce, I don't know if it's the same way for you or not, but I wasn't, until I started to doubt and become skeptical of what I believed in, like critical thinking and questioning of the scriptures and the is it legitimate? All that. Like, I wasn't taught that. I was just,
of course, Oz, you wouldn't be taught that. You would be taught the opposite of that in Christianity. Christianity doesn't teach you skepticism. It actually is against skepticism.
Right.
Skepticism is the destruction of faith. Lean not to thine own understanding. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. So no, skepticism is not allowed. Do not test the Lord thy God.
Yes, that's why I love you, bro. Because I was just going to say that the Bible crushes it with the do not trust on or do not lean on your own understanding. Basically, yeah. Do not study for yourself. Don't learn for yourself. And that's one of the things that's crippled the Catholic Church for millennia. Is they don't want you reading that book outside of the presence of their leaders. But let's listen to what this gentleman has to say about Jesus.
So the sense of rejection that I would inevitably experience when I would break up with a girlfriend or in other situations would drive me towards addictions. And I would just be stuck in this cycle of depression and addiction. Then God would meet me and I would come back to him and I'd begin again. He would wash me. And this happened so many times I can't even count. He was so patient with me. Lots of people tried to help me and I received a lot of help. And I'd go a few steps forward and go lots of steps back. This kind of thing went on for probably 10 years or more. So by this point, when this encounter happened, I'd been around that merry-go-round so many times, and God had restored me. Even when I really lost confidence, even in him, there would be another way that he would show up and have mercy on me. I was so much like Hosea's wife. I would just sell myself back into bondage, and he would redeem me again, and I would sell myself back into bondage. And I had a really hard time holding on to the value that he was affirming to me that he'd given me. And it was just straight unbelief at times. By this point, I should have well been done with certain lifestyle choices. The Bible literally tells us not to make provision for the flesh. And yet, that's exactly what I did. Got together with some buddies that were still into the party scene, and I made space for my flesh to do what it wanted to do. So I violated my conscience.
You know what, Christians? your God fucking forbid you do something for yourself.
Come up a little bit more.
God forbid, Christians, God forbid you do something for your fucking self. And you do something that makes you feel good and that you enjoy and you're passionate about and you don't need your God to make you feel happy about. God forbid.
I don't know what he means by the flesh. I mean, he could be talking about sex. He could be talking about drugs. He could be talking about rock and roll. He's very unspecific here. And so I can't say that you should be doing this or shouldn't be doing this, or this is moral or this is immoral because of the lack of specificity. But I will say that I think he may be purposefully doing that because they link all of these things as equally bad. You know, anything that your flesh desires is equally bad, except when it's not. You know, if it's food and water, then it's good. The appeals to nature are always interesting in Christianity because nature is from God, and it's what you should be doing. It's what you should be emulating, except when it isn't. You know, because it's fallen. And so when it appeals to the argument that this is natural and you should be doing things that are natural and not unnatural, then yeah, nature is good. But when it's something that they consider sinful because of your human nature, well, then nature is bad. It's like they're trying to have it both ways.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's, well, so far what he shared with us is he loves to have relationships. And when he loves relationships, then that then leads him into addictions. And he said he had friends that are in the party scene. So maybe that's addiction to alcohol or a substance or, but
drugs?
you said, like,
we don't know.
Like you said, it's very broad. But then I would still argue that alcohol and drugs, if you're not hurting other people, in my opinion, those are not immoral things. Those are not things that are bondage or shackles, as the Bible would say. Like those unless you're hurting other people, like do you, bro?
Well, and he uses the word addiction here, but I'm not sure if he's using it colloquially or medically. You know, if someone actually is addicted to a substance, then that is, generally speaking, harmful. You know, they could be potentially harming themselves, especially over an extended period of time. But I don't know that that's how he means it. It could just be something that he partakes in. And because he occasionally partakes in it and views it as sinful, he's interpreting it as an addiction. I don't know, but
he just, I won't even, because what I was going to say was going to be anecdotal, so I won't even say it. But it's just so hard to, those are very, he's painting with very wide brushes, trying to tell a story. And that's what probably one of the things I dislike or even hate about people that say, this is my testimony. And they lay all this shit on there. And there are these real broad strokes to try to suck as many people in as possible. And then once you talk to them, they're like, oh, well, I smoked weed like once a month.
Yeah,
that's
part of me listening to this guy. I don't know who he is. I don't know if, you know, he's somebody who's getting paid to do this or if this is a genuine person, but just in listening to the story, the therapist in me wants to sit down with him. I don't get paid to, you know, practice therapy, but my mom is a therapist. I just want to sit down and ask him some questions to go through this, you know, because he sounds like someone who he's still looking for answers, you know, and I'm assuming the video concludes with him saying that he's found answers, but his entire delivery up to this point would suggest that he doesn't even know what the question is, much less the answer.
Yep. Well, let's let him get to the meat of this. I keep it's my fault. I keep stopping it, but let's go.
Conscience. I did what I shouldn't have done. And that evening when I tried to go to sleep, I had a visitation from the Lord. Honestly, when he first showed up, I didn't even know who it was. What happened was my conscience was burning. I was in torment, in the darkness. I saw a man step out of the shadows and stand right in front of me, looking me dead in the eyes. His hairline was deep and his features were very pronounced. And as I looked at him, I knew that he was the smartest, most intelligent, and wise person that ever existed. I knew that he had authority like no.
So I do have to stop it here because my ADHD brain, by the time he gets to the end, I'll forget all this. How do you know? How do you know that?
And I want to ask a very cynical question here. The first question that popped into my mind is, was he white?
Bryce, I love that you said that, because that the very first time I watched it, when he got like one or two, like, I knew he was smart. I knew he was this. That was the first thing. Okay, so was he white, black, Mexican, Puerto Rican? Like, who's this dude? Who is this dude? But
yeah, I mean, I have my suspicion, but I don't want to take it in that direction. But really, kind of the point of asking the question is, what caused you to recognize him as Jesus? Did he look like you? Did he look like the paintings you've seen? It's an interesting question.
And that's why, for those that were here to see the intro, that's why I put that on the intro. How did you know? How did you know that was Jesus? I want to know how you knew that. But I digress. We'll let him keep going.
No one had ever had authority before. As I looked at him, I knew that I was looking at the most powerful man that had ever existed. And yet he was so gentle, and he wasn't assuming. It was almost like you had just entered into a courtroom and the judge just looks like anybody else that you might have seen on the street. But you knew what his position and his role was. You knew that he couldn't be fooled. This guy doesn't seem proud or arrogant or anything like that. In fact, he seems very humble. And yet, you know that he has complete control over your life. It was only after I started to gather all of these attributes of the person that I was looking at that I made the connection and realized who he was. And I realized I was looking at Jesus. And I realized that Jesus was looking at me. And there was disappointment in his eyes.
I have a question for you.
Sadness in his eyes.
Do you think that if he was raised Muslim or Buddhist, that the vision of this person, well, I guess we could ask the question, would he have even had this vision? And if he had had it, would he have interpreted it as Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha or Vishnu or Brahma? I mean, it seems that he knew it was Jesus because that's the religion that he was primed to know whenever he had a vision. That's a rhetorical question. It doesn't require an answer. It's just something to think about.
Yeah, no, I know you're throwing that out for everyone to ponder on, and I agree 100%. So this part of this video does, and I've watched it I think four times now. This part of this video does two things to me. One, it breaks my heart, and two, it angers me. Because this is the emotional manipulation that Christianity does to people. And it breaks my heart for him that he's in tears because he thinks that this God, this Jesus, that's supposed to love him unconditionally and be there for him and love him like a brother, the Bible says, and to, put in today's terms, to be his homeboy, his buddy, that the first thing he supposedly sees, now, obviously we all would probably agree that he didn't actually see Jesus, but he thought he did, or he's thinking he did, or is at least portraying that he did. And the first thing he does is break down in the tears because this God, this brother, this whatever, is so disappointed in him and so saddened by his actions that he breaks down in tears. And this, if you look at the grand scheme of things, this is the grandest form of manipulation and gaslighting that you could ever have from a friend, a partner, a God, or anything like that. And that's, again, like I said, what breaks my heart / pisses me off about religion, and especially the form of Christianity that does this to people, to where it breaks you down to tears because you think somebody is so ashamed of you. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, you mentioned at the top of the show that our stories, you and I, were very similar, but I actually think there's quite a few differences because you grew up in a much more conservative branch of Christianity that was much more hardcore and really kind of programmed these sort of emotions into you, whereas I didn't. I kind of found that by, walking into it, and it was a positive and uplifting thing for me when I was in it, but I never felt the sense of that I was a failure, that I was a disappointment. I mean, I knew I was a sinner, but only because it said I was a sinner, and it said everyone else was a sinner too. So I was no worse than anyone else. I was no better, but that wasn't something to make me fret about. That was God's plan from the beginning, But from your perspective, having been with all the negativity thrown in there on top of that, I think you probably got, this is probably what triggers your emotional response when you see people like this more than me. I think it's sad. Don't get me wrong. It's really sad, but we'll let him go.
Yeah, and that's fair. And that would go to even more so why Christianity, I think, is the hardest religion to buy into, is because there are so many different brands and sections and everything, where there's all of those things that were deposited in me as far as fear and manipulation. And you're like, no, I knew that because the Bible told me so. Where I'm like, no, I know that because everybody told me so. But we'll let him keep going.
Sure.
Eyes. He just sat there looking at me, and he lifted up his hand, and above his hand I saw the world. And it wasn't a model of the world. I knew as I saw it that it was the actual world. It was so three-dimensional, and it was spinning slowly over his hand. But he never looked at it. He kept looking at me. And without saying any words with his mouth, I could hear what he was thinking as the world turned to dust. And it blew away before a speck of the dust could hit his hand. And I saw these tiny little souls, tiny, tiny little souls, just a few fall into his hand. And he started to close his hand around them, and he said, I'm taking what's mine, and this will all be over. I was so terrified in that moment, because I knew that he was saying, I'm not playing any more games with you. You know better by now. You know that this world is dust, and that the only reason it exists is for the harvest of souls that I'm going to take out of it. Do you know it was love for God to say those things to me? It was love for him to show me that.
No, that's not love.
I'm not playing any more games with you. No, actually, that's all you're doing. That's literally what he just described would be the biggest. He had the earth in his hand. He set it on fire. Then he caught some people, cast them aside. I mean, that's a game, a sick, twisted game. And you have reverence for being that does that. First of all, the earth is, of all the billions of planets that presumably exist in the universe, Earth is, I guess, the only one that's important. It's the only one that matters to God. But we are so self-centered. We really think we are. Many of us still think we are the center of the universe. The only reason the universe exists is for Earth and the humans on it, God's favorite planet, his master creation. Just the arrogance of that, But then on top of that, he's playing a game with it. I'll create it 1 minute, I'll kill everybody in the next, I'll repopulate it, then I'll set it on fire, I'll catch some souls, toss these aside. That sounds like a game to me. Like that sounds like a simulation that we could play on PlayStation. There used to be a game back in the day called Black and White, where you basically play a god and you can pretty much do whatever you want to. You can be good, you can be evil, you can,
Yeah.
But
yeah, when I hear this stuff and I'm like, I hate it. I hate it that people are still being, manipulated and brainwashed and convinced that this thing is real, and that it operates in this way, and it's acceptable. That you should accept it as normal. You should accept it as okay, and it's not. It's not, because if anybody else did that to you, like played those level games with you in real life, it would be abuse, assault. It'd be something, along those lines. So I think
what, you're right, Oz. It would be abuse and assault if another person did that to you. However, depending on who that person was and how they did it, you may not recognize it as abuse or assault. I talk about how people get caught up in cults. Yep. And it seems strange that anyone could find themselves in a cult with how extreme they are, or like the white supremacist groups or anything like that, terrorism. How do people let themselves fall into such an extreme ideology or a cult? And it's because of charismatic leaders convincing them, brainwashing them, and abusing them on top of that, but convincing them that they're not being abused, and that they should actually revere the abuser and praise them. It happens all the time. If it can happen with humans, it can happen with ideas like God, like Jesus.
Absolutely. So let's hear more about this great God.
It was love for him to make me feel grieved for a moment so that I could snap out of it and realize that I could not play with that fire anymore. You see, there's grace for us when we're authentically struggling with something. There's grace and patience when we stumble because of ignorance, but there comes a time when we do know better. There comes a time when we've seen too much. And when we've crossed a certain threshold of maturity or healing or revelation, because revelation in God is healing, there's certain things that we can't afford to entertain any longer. God is going to judge the world. He has extended himself to you through the person of Jesus Christ. Today, if you still have breath to breathe, then you are still walking in the grace and mercy of God. There will come a time when either you go to him or he's coming to us, and the corruptible will put on incorruptible. Mortality will be swallowed up by immortality, and all of us will go from having these seed-form bodies to having the glorious bodies or immortal bodies, just like Jesus has right now already. Jesus is the express image of the invisible God. He's lowly in spirit, he's humble, but he is the judge of all the living and the dead, and rightfully so. There's no one more full of humility and justice and rightness than Jesus, who literally came and laid down all of his glory so that he could save and serve the lost. And the very people who said the most ignorant things about him, and the very people who tortured and killed him. Jesus is worthy to be crowned the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and he is worthy to be placed in the position of authority to judge all the living and the dead. You're never going to look at Jesus at the end of your life and say you weren't being fair. You aren't being fair. When you look at Jesus, you know that any good thing that you get from God is only because he had mercy, not because he owed.
How do you know that? When he says, when you look at Jesus, you know this. When you look at Jesus, you know that. Is he talking about himself, or is he talking about what I know when I supposedly see this Jesus? Because I don't understand how he could know what I would know.
Bryce, he has to be talking. He's got to be staring into a mirror right now with the camera, because I know he ain't talking about us.
He's not talking about anyone, except it sounds like he's saying, I had an experience. This is the way it went. Therefore, it necessarily will go the exact same way for everyone else in this world. How can you possibly know that? How can you know what someone else knows at all, unless you're psychic? The answer is you can't.
Exactly.
But so many people make this claim as though they can. At this point, really, he's just quoting scripture and preaching. But I have to wonder, why should we listen to anything that's in the Bible? Like, you had an experience and you're interpreting it through the Bible. Why? Where did you get the idea that anything in the Bible is correct? How do you know that what is written is true? Maybe you're interpreting the vision the wrong way. Why didn't you read the Quran to see what it had to say about this vision you had? Did the vision tell you he was Jesus, or did you just assume that it was Jesus?
Or
I don't know.
Why didn't you go talk to a therapist? Because I have no.
Well, yeah, but
I have no problem with people talking to a God. It's when the God starts talking back to you, or you say that the God is revealing himself to you, that I feel like we're on another playing field now. That you probably need to talk to a professional. But yeah, it's well, and the not all, but most Christian's favorite argument is the circular argument. So he went from complete anecdotal personal experience, dream, imagination shit to now, again, this is the con job. This is the manipulation that they do, which is what I was referring to earlier, is this is what they do. This is exactly what they do. It's the brainwashing or the pardon my expression, the mind fuck that happens, where it's like, and that's exactly what an abusive partner does.
Yeah, and it's a complete non sequitur, as you just said. I mean, you can't get from I had a personal experience to therefore everyone knows. That doesn't follow. Everyone has to have the same personal experience and interpret it in the same way in order to reach any level of knowledge that you claim to have. And then you still won't know because their experiences are subjective. You can't share your experience with me. I can't share mine with you. I don't know what you saw. You don't know what I saw. We can make claims about it all day long, but it'll never be objective,
Right.
But he hasn't even gotten there. He just had one experience that he's kind of asserting onto everyone else because that's what the book says. But why are we caring about what the book says? I don't know.
Yeah, and he has a few minutes left. I'll play it. I think he makes one or two more points that I think are ridiculous, and we'll stop it and we'll go into some Q&A. So if anybody out there has questions for Bryce or I about this or whatever, we'll take questions at the end. But we'll give this guy a couple more minutes because I think he makes one or two more points and then straight goes into just scripture reading, preaching. So.
Anything to you? The whole human race, we call ourselves good people, but we're not good people. We hate each other.
Just because you think you're a bad person doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Doesn't mean my homie Bryce is a bad person. Get out of here with that shit.
We backbite, we take things personally, and then we seek revenge. We use each other to get
stop
ahead
right there
in
for a
life.
moment.
We devalue each other.
Everything that he just said there is problematic because one, we do all of that stuff. You're right. He's talking about himself, and this is him extending his own behavior and the things that he seems to recognize about himself as bad because they really are bad, or maybe just because he thinks it is because it says so. He's assuming that applies to everyone else because it says so, but it doesn't, and this is one way that we can falsify the Bible. If if you know that any of those things don't actually apply to you, then you can disregard the whole thing because you've proved it to be false. We don't hate each other.
Mm-mm.
I don't hate you. I don't hate him. I don't even know you, Well, why would I hate somebody that I don't know? I feel sorry for him. But he mentioned a few other things, but one of the things he mentioned was revenge. Is revenge bad? I say it is, but the reason I say it is because I'm a humanist. If I was a Christian, I don't know why a Christian would assume that vengeance is bad just because God says don't do it. He enacts vengeance and God is good. So there's a problem. If God enacts vengeance, if he's a vengeful God and a wrathful God, but he's also good, then where did you get this idea that revenge is bad?
Yeah, because it says the revenge is the Lord's. It's his. He's got ownership.
Yeah.
That's his shit. Thus,
right. And if he has all of the revenge, then he's the worst person in the world. Worse than anyone else in the world. If he claims all vengeance for himself and revenge is bad, then he's not the God for you, or at least he's not a God that you should be worshiping because he's good. Maybe you're worshiping out of fear,
Yeah, and
powerful
that would,
God, he can still destroy you with a snap of his finger, but he's not good. You're worshiping out of fear at that point.
and that would further demonstrate the validity of Matt Dillahunty's mob boss analogy.
I want to talk more about revenge afterwards, but I want to let you get through that because I have a few more things to say about it.
All right, let's let her roll.
We exploit each other, not to mention the actual atrocities, the actual raping, murdering, killing, destroying that we do to each other. But none of us are part of that in some way. No one is going to stand before Jesus and be able to say that they were innocent. We all need the perfect, spotless Son of God and his taking our place and suffering the judgment that we should have experienced so that we can be washed in his forgiveness and we can stand justified before God. And then we live a life of humility.
I just got to do this real quick because I've been to it a minute ago. We did get a super chat. Atheist Cats, $5. Thank you very much. Broad generic statements are classic propaganda tricks. Make it vague and people will fill in the blanks that fits your own life. Somebody get that man a prize because he answered correctly. Ding, ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding, ding.
this is how psychics get people's money all the time. You mentioned a bunch of vague, generic things. You have a sister. Well, yeah, I do have a sister. Yeah, and you're very angry right now. Yeah, it's work. Work is getting you down. Wow, this guy, give him all my money. If the psychic says 10 things, the six of them that you think apply to you will convince you that this person is actually a psychic, and you'll forget about the 4 that he got wrong.
Yep, I'm pulling this up. I'm taking a screenshot of the questions here so that way I don't miss them later. Jesus Unfollower in the house. What up? What up? But let's finish this up, and I'll do a shout out to the chat room here in a minute, and then Bryce and I will chop it up and then get into questions. So if you have a question, tag. If you would tag at Oz, that way it lights up on my phone and I can see it. But let's do it to it.
And worship of the one true King, and we do good because we love him, not because we're trying to get into heaven, because there is no such thing as a good person in this world. And I know a lot of people might have struggled like I did, like, God, what about the children? What about the mentally crippled? What about the physically crippled? What about the aborted? What about the miscarried? The Bible illustrates so clearly, and Jesus articulates so clearly, the truly disadvantaged will be in the kingdom of heaven with him. He said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. But you have to understand, God is not going to judge someone without having offered them time and time again the opportunity to make a better choice. Today I place before you life and death. Choose life. You can try to make an excuse and say that if God was real, if God was good, these things wouldn't have happened to those people. But God says, I've got those people who have been overlooked and oppressed and have had no justice in this life, or had their life completely robbed from them before they could even live it. He said, theirs is the kingdom of God. It's the rest of us who have been given so much. We're the ones who are in danger. The proud, the arrogant, the lofty, the selfishly ambitious, those of us who justify ourselves by our own wicked and perverted standards, we're the ones that are in danger. God doesn't want to judge anybody. It says he desires that all would come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. But he will have to at some point. So today, choose life. Choose Jesus. Put your trust in Jesus and receive the Holy Spirit, and he will lead you for the rest of your life until you see him face to face.
What a failed God. God wants none to suffer. He wants that everyone should know him. What a failure. That's got to be, if I were a betting man, that's not the God to bet on. Clearly, he cannot accomplish what he wants. Doesn't even make an attempt to, really. In fact, he works against his own agenda.
Yeah, when I think about it, that's what, like, part of me, like I said earlier, part of me, my heart breaks because I've been there, and the other part of me gets angered because I've been there. So I have to be careful to not let my emotions get involved in it. But it is like just listening to him talk. I'm like, oh, dude, I've already heard this 100,000 times, bro. I've heard this 100,000 times, bro. You were lost in that Jesus sauce, just like all the other people that I've talked to, until logic and reason and skepticism slap some taste in your mouth. Like that's
and
what it
for some people will learn how to do that, and others never will, because unfortunately, this is one of those religions, like some others out there, that really kind of prevents people from doing that. We talked about it a little while ago. Christianity the Bible does not encourage skepticism. It does not encourage critical thinking. It in fact condemns it, you know. So you're kind of trapped, you know, unless you are really diligent and really, if you have help from the outside, you stumble upon a class or two. This is one of the reasons why I think critical thinking should be mandatory in grade school and in high school. It's unfortunately something that you have to willingly take in upper and higher education, but most people don't have it. And this is how we end up with a lot of people who think this way.
Yeah. So there's a couple things there at the end that you said you wanted to comment on.
Yeah. I mean, he was speaking so fast. It's clearly a script, you know, and I don't know if this person, like I said, I don't know how authentic this is. I have no reason to doubt that this person actually had an authentic experience. I don't know who wrote the script for him, if this is something some preachers wanted him to do for the sake of propaganda. I don't know if he came up with this on his own. But it's clever. It's clever scripting in that the scriptures, the quoting of the scriptures and the preaching are in there at just the right moments. They don't make any sense. They didn't make any sense to begin with, but juxtaposing them with his experience can lead a person who doesn't know how to reason or a person who doesn't know how to think very well to the conclusion that he wants them to get to. So that's kind of sad. The idea of vengeance, though, when he was talking about that, it reminded me of an argument that I used to make. Why does God need vengeance?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of vengeance? Why do we consider revenge bad when people seek it? There is a good answer for that. You know, it's because it's a hypocrisy. You know, seeking revenge over someone makes you just as bad as the person who wronged you in the first place. Rising above that, you know, not taking revenge on someone else, recognizing that they wronged you, but deciding to be a better person than them is the thing that makes you better, you know. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And so, you know, that's not really, that's not someone who I would want to rise to. You know, there's just no real explanation for why when we get harmed, you know, revenge, I just spent a lot of time condemning it, but it's a natural instinct that humans have. Because we have emotions, we have human emotions, and we're flawed that way. We react, and this is why we put justice, the legal justice system, at least in our country, into the hands of other people and not the individual. You know, we don't allow vigilantism, we don't allow vengeance, killings, and so on. You have to be judged by a jury of your peers because presumably they're non-biased and the emotional connection is not there. But it's an emotional response. And it's only done to make you feel better because you were injured. Why did God create humans that could injure him in such a way that he would need to enact revenge on them? That's a weak God, you know? Any God that needs to enact vengeance is very weak and emotionally frail, just like a human.
Yeah, those are great points. And to be honest, I've looked at the retribution, the vengeance, and all that, but I've never. I can honestly say I've never looked at it in the light I think that you're shining on it. Whereas, like, you know, if he is, and I'm going to do like a body motion because it's what's happened in my brain. Like, if we're going to do this, like wrap, like go back around to God is love. If we're going to go here and go full circle back around to this. Then how do we connect? Like in my brain, I'm doing it like out loud. Like, how do we connect this to this? Like, I don't think we can connect this to this. It's like trying to connect Legos that don't fit.
Yeah, there's no connection there, and because there's no connection, there's no answer. What you have is cognitive dissonance on the part of the believing person. Hate is the opposite of love, but God does both. Therefore, he can't be one or the other exclusively. Vengeance is wrong and it's evil, but God does it. In fact, he requests all of it for himself, but still calls himself good. You can't square that hole, you know, or you can't. I don't know if I said that right, but you know what I'm trying to say. It doesn't work together. It doesn't fit together. These things are contradictory. They're paradoxical. You know, And this is another indication that these are works written by men. If there was an all-knowing God, he would see the problem there, and he wouldn't have written it that way. He would have written it in such a way that it's logically consistent, unless you believe in an illogical God, or that God can do and say illogical things. That's not wisdom, but he described God as the smartest person. He described Jesus as the smartest person that had ever lived. A smart person would know that these things are contradictory, and therefore good evidence that this is information passed down by flawed thinking men and not a supreme intelligence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we do have a few questions here. So I want to make sure that I get to these here real quick. So where'd it go? Every time I try to click on one, the thing disappears. So first and foremost is from Samuel Doolittle.
Do you claim to be the true San Francisco tree? No, I do not, because I'm from New York. So, but I do love rice-a-roni, and I remember wanting to. That was like one of my favorite meals as a kid. So, there you go. And it's kind of that's kind of a double or triple entendre, if that's a thing too. There's a couple other meanings behind my screen name as well, but we won't get into that right now.
All right, so we have another one. Let's see, I might be able to pop this one up still. Let's see what's up here. Here we go. So another round of applause. Can God make a tart so delicious he can't refrain from eating it?
Nice.
You're looking at it, kid. You're looking at it. I can't.
Excuse me.
There should be one more. Another round of applause. Geo Sam at TART. Question for Oz and Bryce. As a Christian, in what way did you justify believing this?
You want to go first, or you want me to?
Go ahead. You're the guest.
In my mind, I didn't need a justification. It seemed intuitive to me. And intuition is one of those things that a lot of people fall back on because it seems correct. When you don't know critical thinking, when you have no reason to be skeptical of your own experiences, when you never test the things that you believe and you just believe them because they seem like they make sense, then you don't need a justification, at least in your own mind. No one has ever taught you that positions require justifications, rational justifications, this is something that I learned afterwards. So yeah, intuition is one of those things that a lot of people use and defend as being a reasonable way to know things, but intuition is not always correct. If we all relied on intuition, if we only ever relied on intuition, humanity, we would still be on a flat Earth that was at the center of the universe. Because that's, that the sun revolves, it literally revolves around the Earth. If you look up, that's what it looks like. It's intuitive to know that the sun revolves around the Earth, and yet that's wrong. We've proven with science and empiricism that is incorrect. So intuition is not something to be taken at face value always. And
remember, the moon is a light-giving source.
Right.
Remember that.
Yeah. It has its own light.
Remember that shit. It's got a little night light.
It also has a dimmer because parts of it dim according to the day of the month, and then it comes back on again. So God has a dimmer switch on the light. Right.
And then what you didn't know is when the year 2030 rolls around, God is upgrading to clap on, clap off. You didn't know that, did you?
I didn't. Is that in what passage? What chapter and verse is that?
That's in Tartians 3:16.
Ah, gotcha. Like that. Yeah.
But to answer that from from my point of view, Geo Sam, and great question, because there are a lot of your cradle atheists, and Pasta Mike loves it when I say that, but your cradle atheists that don't understand how one can justify it. It's not that we willingly or even knowingly justified some of these things. They weren't taught to us. We weren't openly taught or shown that slavery was in the Bible, or that racism was in the Bible, or that murder was in the Bible, or genocide was in the Bible, or that child abuse was in the Bible. Like, they don't offer those things up. Those aren't, those aren't freebies like they are when you go into the atheist community. I still tell people, I remember the first time watching, not the first time I watched the Atheist Experience, but the first time where I heard Matt Dillahunty go to Hosea 13, 11 or 13, whatever, bash the kids' heads on stones, rip the babies out of the mother's wombs. And I'm like, this dude is full of shit. This dude is full of shit right now. Like, I was starting to get angry. So then I got my little Bible and I looked it up and I was like, God damn it.
Yeah. I mean, how about when God sends the bears to maul the children?
Yeah, that too. I remember the first time I heard an atheist talk about that online. I was like, where do you guys come up with this shit? It's not in this Bible. And I go look it up. I'm like, God damn it. Yeah. God damn it. So Geo Sam, hopefully that gives you a little more understanding, or a look under the hood, where when I'll speak for me, I won't speak for Bryce or anybody else, but for me, like, being 100% indoctrinated into it, you only believe what you're programmed to believe. Because my earliest memories at like 6 years old or whatever are in church at mom's music practice and Bible studies and all that shit. Like, all I ever knew was that book and what all of the adults and all the quote unquote leaders in my life told me about that book and about the religion. That's all I knew. So it wasn't that I was a bad person. I was just taught a bad idea or a bad belief. And as soon as I got away from it, now I'm a completely different human being when it comes to the way I view the world, humanity, social topics, political issues. Like, I'm a completely different person now that I've completely backed out of all of that religious bullshit. And now I focus on humanism. I'm a completely different human being.
And going back to that question for a minute, because I didn't even interpret Geo's question that way, but that was a really good point that you brought up as far as all the atrocities and the bad things in the Bible. How do you justify that? I didn't know about a lot of them. And the few that I did know about, they were interpreted in such a way, in the most benign way possible, that I did create justifications, or justifications were provided to me that I just ran with and didn't question. I was on my phone a second ago and I just looked up this quote from Chris Rock that I remembered as you were telling that story. If you're Black and Christian, you have a real short memory. And I bring that up because slavery is in the Bible. Most African Americans are Christian, and the few that aren't are Muslim, and there's a couple of atheists here and there, but we are a very, very, very small minority within a minority. What are you showing me? Oh yeah, did the Old Testament.
This is the audience. You go ahead.
Yeah. I would venture, this is unscientific. I haven't conducted a poll or a survey. I would venture a guess that most African Americans do not read the Old Testament. They purposefully don't read it. They've heard people mention slavery in it, but they haven't actually read the verses that talk about slavery. And the few that have, a large portion of them make excuses for it simply by dismissing it as, oh, that wasn't slavery, that was indentured servitude. It's just the verbiage is wrong. Or it was a different kind of slavery, or God needed to regulate slavery at that time. And just, all the typical excuses that white Christians use, including the ones whose ancestors had slaves, but it was nothing like the kind of slavery that we had here in America. It was a completely different kind of slavery. That's what they'll tell you, because they haven't read the verses where you're allowed to beat your slaves, just like here in America when we had slavery. They didn't read the verses where you're allowed to own the slaves that you take from the foreign nations for life and pass them to your children. just like what we did in the United States. It's exactly the same kind of slavery, and it's exactly the same Christians who were the slave masters in the American slave trade who used these verses to justify what they were doing, and then gave the Bible to the African Americans so that they could see that slaves were to obey their masters, even the cruel ones. And this is how you have the prominence of Christianity in the African American community. It's a slave religion. It is the white man's religion. It was forced upon you to keep you in slavery. And so I feel really embarrassed whenever I hear a Black person talk about the slavery in the Bible and make the most pathetic excuses, because, I mean, I guess I shouldn't expect them to know better. In fact, I expect them not to. But the fact that you could be so anti-slavery in one aspect and so tolerant of it in another, that's the ultimate cognitive dissonance, in my opinion. And it's really sad. So to answer your question, Gio, you can religion allows you to justify anything. You can have a justification for anything. If you can justify the slavery of human beings coming from a race of people who was the descendant of slaves, you can justify anything. Yeah. You can justify murdering babies, which the Bible also allows and says it's justifiable sometimes. There's nothing that can't be justified using religion, using the Bible.
Yeah, Christians and specifically, let me backtrack, because all of a sudden people are getting lazy when they talk to me. Not all Christians, when I say that, but most, I will say most Christians, especially Christian apologetics or apologists, they love to use exegesis and hermeneutics and yuda to justify all this bullshit. Mm-hmm. I love it. And I got to give a shout out to IQ. I don't know if he's on here right now, but we did a show a couple weeks ago together with Jenna and Ethan, and I hadn't heard it in a while, and he brought it up again. If you can't explain it, if you think something is real, and there are complex things in the world, but some of your basic things that just you should know and love and enjoy, if you can't explain it fully to a 5-year-old and then get it, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And I mean, and to me, this God that's supposed to be all loving, all knowing, all the alls, that God should be able to reveal itself to someone that's intelligent as you, Bryce. And I feel like I'm steps way below folks like you and Justin and some of the others, where I'm down here like 8 rings, right? And then
I don't feel that way, but I appreciate the compliment, but I don't interpret it that way. I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead and finish.
But there's some people that, I love them, we love them, that just they were born with mental limitations that God would still have to make himself real to them, right? And to be able to experience and know him and do all those things. So why is it so complicated? Why can we not explain this to a 5-year-old?
Well, the reason we can't explain it to a 5-year-old is the same reason that we can't explain it to a 52-year-old, because no man can know the mind of God except when they can. I think the gentleman in the video said that it's beyond human comprehension, or words to that effect. This idea that we cannot fully understand God. Whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? He was the designer, supposedly. He designed us in such a way that we couldn't understand him, and then punishes us for not understanding. Or he saves the ones who don't understand because of mercy and grace and all that, but then punishes the other ones who try to understand but fail. It seems like a piss poor design. So, and at some point you have to blame the designer.
Exactly. And that's that was a perfect segue. So anybody else in the in the chat has questions for Bryce or myself, go ahead and shoot it off here before we wrap off. We're approaching the 1.5 hour mark. This is my end of the day argument is we have a creator that supposedly knows everything, if you're a Christian, and is really, when we start breaking down humanity and our existence according to the scripture and all of these shortcomings and all of the other things that have been really fucked up, God, Yahweh, whatever they call you, you just suck at creating. And not only do you suck at creating, you suck at giving your creation an environment to which they can succeed without failing, because you set them up to fail. You set them up to fail. So that's where I hang my hat. It's one of the two or both. And the fact that you made a creation knowing they were going to fail, and you hung your hat on the fact that they were going to fail, makes you a fucked up creator. And I digress.
Yeah. I mean, the simple question for me is, why is God hiding? If it's so obvious, why do we need to find him? You know, it's like he's hiding behind some bushes waiting for us to solve the riddle. Why did he make it a riddle to be solved? Why do we need apologists? Why is Christian apologetics a thing? Why would an all-knowing God use this methodology to communicate his existence to beings who can't fully understand him? Why would he use the most flawed methodology possible, scripture and preaching and apologetics, rather than simply reveal himself for everyone so that the question is settled? And there is no good answer for that. Well, there's one. Well, it's not a good answer, but there's an answer for that, because there is a branch of Christians who thinks that God did reveal himself to everyone, that everyone knows that there's a God and they're just suppressing the truth and righteousness, or whatever the hell that means, right? It's kind of a made up thing. It doesn't really mean anything, but that's their answer, because there's no answer to the question, why doesn't God reveal himself? There's no legitimate answer. You have to either say something like, well, God works in mysterious ways, or he has a plan, and not be able to articulate what that plan is. Or you have to go to well, he has revealed himself to everyone, you're just suppressing the truth. And you can dismiss those people automatically, because you know that what they're saying is bullshit, right? They don't know what you know, but you know what you know. And if they're telling you something that you don't know, they're wrong. Therefore, all of their beliefs are falsified, and you've disproved their version of God. So that leaves you with the Christians who admit that God doesn't reveal himself to everyone, and they have no answer for why he doesn't.
Yes, 100%. 100%. And I have one more question here. And as always, to Kat the humanist with an applause. Tart, do you think if Christians first learned about the history of religion and all the shenanigans going on during biblical times, including the politics behind it, they would still become a Christian? Go ahead.
Depends on how they became a Christian in the first place. I think a lot of them would not be. It depends on how they became a Christian and at what age they became a Christian, how they were indoctrinated. Were they indoctrinated from a young age? Because the younger you are, the harder it is to get out. You know, children before the age of 7, which is generally recognized in psychology as being before the age of reason, are indoctrinated into belief systems. They grow up without the understanding that this is something to be questioned. You know, their parents believe this, they've told them to believe it. Children trust their parents. It's not questionable. Of course there's a God. Everyone knows there's a God. My parents told me there was a God when I was 5. You'll believe it. You know, you're likely to believe it for an extended period of time, and it takes something like a traumatic experience to come out of that. That's the danger of indoctrination. People who come to religion after just falling into it, studying it themselves, they can learn critical thinking. It's hard, you know, but they can learn it, and they can learn understanding history, you know, going to school, learning some shit about the world, learning something about other religions, learning about the Bible and how the Bible came to be and how it was constructed and how it was canonized and on whose authority, and the history of the church. Church teaches you a lot of what's in the Bible, but it doesn't tell you anything about what the Bible is or where it came from. You know, they usually don't preach about that. That's stuff you have to learn outside of the church.
Yeah, it's would they have became? Let me make sure I read that one more time. Make sure I understand it right.
Yeah. And so my answer, I don't know if I actually answered the question. I think some of them would, and some of them would need more than that. They would need to learn not only the history of religion, but they would also need to learn history in general, the history of the church, and whether or not some of these people who are claimed to exist actually exist.
Yeah, I think I can make an honest stab and agree with what Bryce said, but maybe take it a step further. I think majority of people, if they were taught the history of religion in its totality, not just Christianity, but all the religions, and how inconsistent all of them are when it comes to archaeological data, scientific data, and all that. I think we'd have fewer and fewer theists every single year if that was taught to them before they were indoctrinated into the theology, the theologies, and the doctrines, and the rules, and the commandments, and all that bullshit.
And there's another thing we have to factor in here. One of the reasons why that's so important, the before or after, the when they start learning, is because, remember, there is no such thing as history and archaeology that predates Genesis if you're a Christian. The world is 6,000 to 10,000 years old if you're a certain type of Christian. So any history or archaeology or science or any discoveries that predate that are not real. You can't work that into your worldview without destroying it, And so they come in with these blinders on, knowing that the God of Abraham was the first God, and that this idea wasn't ripped off from, Zoroastrianism or the Greek pantheon or a dozen other places before that pre-existed Judaism even, So that's kind of the problem with that, like learning about history, learning about science. When you're looking at ancient history and archaeology and anthropology, if you're looking at it through the Christian lens, you'll interpret it in an unscientific way. And so it has no impact on you.
Right. And before we do wrap up here, because we're right at the hour and a half mark, Bryce, if you met somebody that, and you can pick it, you could say me, but pick a name and say I told you tomorrow that, you know what, Bryce, we've had great conversations, man, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. You're a cool guy to talk to, man. But I've turned back to God, and I'm serving God as a friend, being a skeptic and already knowing, now my background in atheism and skepticism. What questions would you ask? Where would you be if I said
that? Well, excuse me. This has actually happened to me recently. So I'm the perfect person to ask that question. And I don't know that the questions I asked would be successful. But the simplest questions are, beginning with the obvious, what drove you to this new change? Because that seems like a radical departure from your previous position. If your answer was, I had a personal experience or a personal revelation, then my questioning would go to, what was the nature of this experience? Was it visual? Was it audible? Was it tangible? Have you tested it? Did anyone else see this? How do you know it was real? Etc. And that methodology, people will, what I've experienced anyway, with the person that I'm thinking about, it goes back to intuition. It just feels right. It seemed right. I just know it was right. I know it. And so that's a non-answer. But it's a non-answer that's designed to get around the question, because if something seems so intuitive, but you didn't engage in any testing, any objective testing, or any, have no empirical way of demonstrating to yourself, not really to anyone else, but to yourself, that this experience was authentic, and you make no effort to do though, then you've essentially given up, and you were probably look, I don't look for God, but the reason I don't look for God is because I'm not convinced that there's one to look for. And I'm also not convinced that it's something that I need to look for, even if there was, anyone who's looking to find God, if you're an atheist and you're looking for God, you're probably not an atheist. You probably believe in something and you're looking for things to validate your beliefs, which is the opposite of how science works, by the way. You should be looking to falsify your beliefs, but if you're looking to make the thing that you believe in true, you will interpret anything as revealing of that truth eventually. If you want it to be true bad enough. My brain doesn't work that way. There are a lot of things that I want to be true that I know are not true, and I can sit here and believe it all day long. I believe I can fly. I think a famous R&B singer, who once said that. But look, I'm wearing a shirt that says I can fly, but I'm not jumping off of any buildings, no matter how much I want that to be true. So no, I don't look for ways to test my, ability to defy gravity. It's a cool thought, it's a nice imagination, but it's imagination. It's make believe. It's a fairy tale. I have to deal with reality, and so I can put this shirt on and go drift off into my daydreams with a beer after I get off a hard day's work, and maybe that will relax me a little bit, but I'm not actually going to try it in real life or employ this in my life as though it's representative of reality. And I think that that's what a lot of religious people do because they don't have other coping mechanisms.
Yeah, no, totally agree. We do have one more question, and then we are going to wrap up because we're about 3 minutes over. Creation, whoever creation is, creation says Oz was a creation. Thank you. I think I don't know.
I was a creation too. I was created by my mama and my daddy.
Yeah, same here. And your comment was a comment. I think that's what we're getting to. But here's the last question from the one and only Richard Matson. TART being Bryce and myself tonight. Why does God not reveal himself to everyone? First, he does in end times. Second, our experience on this earth would be compromised by such knowledge.
Are you familiar with Richard Matson?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. So that I'm very cautious when responding to him because I have to recognize that his perspective is atypical for most Christians, and his interpretation of the Bible. Although those two answers that he gave are more indicative of, I think at least the first answer that he gave that he does at end times would probably be something that a lot of other Christians would say as well, the ones that don't claim that he already has. Yeah. You don't have enough time for us to go into that one, but we it would take a lot more time to peel back that onion.
Yeah, I was about to say, Richard, you're and I love listening to Richard.
I do too.
Richard,
he really is a great guy. I like.
I agree. I was going to say, Richard, I know this may be a little too street or hood or whatever, but I think you're my homeboy. Like I love this to you. I love your arguments. I love how you challenge Christians to and what they believe. I just think that those questions are at the end of a stream are too much to delve into because that'll be another hour or two of us talking.
Have you guys had him on TART yet?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Just making sure.
Oh yeah. But all right, before we wrap it up, Bryce, first of all, thanks kind of last minute jumping on hanging out with me tonight. But I was going through and I was like, I want to do this stream. Like I just found that video today. I was like, I want to do this stream. And I was like, who would be great to have on? I was like, Bryce would be great. Bryce has great insight on these things. And he grew up in church. And I was like, I'm gonna hit him up first. So I appreciate you coming on and hanging out and going through this video with me. But before we go, I want you to be able to talk about you. So what's going on with you, or even anything to do with you and the EA show? What the fuck do you have going on, man?
Well, we just hit 100 100. We just hit 1,000 subscribers over on the EA show, and so we appreciate all the support from you guys, and we're definitely looking to grow and expand. But yeah, as far as me personally, I don't do much. I'm kind of really involved in school right now, and so I co-host EA show every Tuesdays. Might be getting into a little bit more than that on my own channel, but I haven't really developed it yet, and it requires a lot of my attention. And I have to wait until I complete my master's degree before I really get involved. And so, but I am on Facebook, I am on Twitter, Bryce Aroni on both. Yeah, I'm always posting my thoughts on some of those pages, and yeah, that's really all I got going on. I'm kind of broadcasting from an atypical location because I'm not in my house. I'm in my mom's house right now, but next week I should be back. And
did I just hear Bryce mention him doing something with his own channel?
Yeah, well, I just kind of started it. There's not a lot of content on there right now, which is why I haven't really promoted it at all. But I'm still in the process of figuring out what I'm actually going to do. It's probably not going to be religion based because I've kind of got that covered already. But yeah, I'll be growing it and promoting it more once I figure out a direction for it. But right now, school is kind of really taking my focus, so I don't want to commit to anything too strongly right now.
As it should be, Ben. As it should be.
And I also wanted to say, because I didn't mention it, the gentleman from the video, we talked about, I feel sad for him, but I don't think that he's a bad guy. Right. I think that he thinks that he's a bad guy, and that's the sad part. I think that he thinks he's a shitty person because Christianity teaches you that you're a shitty person, which makes it a shitty religion. You're not a terrible person because some book said so. And that the insidious part is that this has corrupted people's mind to make them think that they have no worth and that they have no value. We need to get away from that and teach people that they do have worth and that they do have value for being who they are. So,
right. No, and thank you for saying that, because I was going to say I'm glad that Bryce joined me tonight, because had I done this alone tonight, I probably would have got my feels, because having somebody that I can bounce things on back and forth and keep myself in check helps me, because that whoever that gentleman was, I agree with Bryce. You're not a bad person.
I view him as a victim, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's how I see it too. And that's why I said earlier that it literally does break my heart. And when the people on our channel see me cry, so it doesn't matter. The first time I watched this, I was in tears, because it was like, this was me. Like, this breaks my heart. Mm-hmm. Then the next, like, almost automatic emotion is I get angry, because I'm like, I hate. This is why I hate religion, not the people. This is why I hate religion and the dogma and the bullshit that's involved, because it does this to people. They feel like they're scum. They feel like they're shit. They feel like they're nothing without this God. Mm-hmm. And which is why I wanted somebody to bounce off of tonight, because I knew it'd keep me even. So, Bryce, thank you.
You can get in your feels every now and again. There's no shame in that. But I appreciate you having me, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you were the perfect person to have on tonight to have that conversation and be able to chop it up and do the damn thing. But I haven't all night. So, Bryce, if you don't mind, real quick, I just want to go through the chat, because I've not shown them any love so far, and I want to make sure we do that. So, Richard Matson, again, thanks for the question earlier, and I'd love to get back to that later. Nicholas, tighten your anus. Tighten your anus.
I'm embarrassed to say that it took me until very recently to realize that was how his name would be said out loud.
Tighten your anus.
So,
and then our boy Jim Benton, and my music disappeared, but that's it. Oh, here we go. We'll do that. That's loud. Tighten your anus. Ox, that's my little brother. Ox is my little brother. Oz is the big brother. Big Grumps in the house. Megan, Samuel, do nothing. Atheist cats. Fog Ken, IQ, Big Ups, Blacka, Grumler, Fog Ken. I'm scrolling now. Cat the Humanist, Lion's Den, and that's the furthest I'm going up. But thank you guys. Someone said, "Oh, I see you got a new toy." Yeah, can you guys still hear me? This is a good time to test. It's late at night. Can you guys hear the music in my voice?
I can. I don't know if YouTube can.
Sweet. It's a good time to test. But thank you guys for hanging out with Bryce and with Oz. And we'll sign out. Peace out, y'all.